Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, ISME is very concerned around the increased number of Irish businesses that have fallen victim to fraudulent activity and are actively lobbying government agencies to address this issue urgently. Neil McDonnell is the Chief Executive of ISME and he joins us now to tell us more. Neil, we'll be discussing a growing issue facing businesses in Ireland, which is fraud. But before we discuss that, as the Chief Executive of ISME, you're ideally placed to assess the sentiment amongst SME owners right now. So how would you describe it?
Good morning to you, Karl. I would say it's muted at the minute, while the domestic economy and everything you read about it at the minute looks rosy, both in terms of the expansion of our GDP and our net national income. Business owners also see huge cost increases around them, and while I know that food and energy prices have retreated slightly, but the costs still coming down the tracks at the most, especially in terms of labour costs, are very significant, and sentiment is definitely muted among a lot of employers.
Now, I've invited you onto this morning's programme to discuss the issue of fraud and the cost which it incurs for businesses. So just how serious is this problem?
It's very hard to get an accurate handle on it, Carl, because we know for a fact, and we know because businesses tell us, that it is a substantially underreported crime, and it's underreported because this type of fraudulent activity is not covered by a lot of insurance policies, and therefore businesses see no added benefit to it in reporting it to an insurer or to the Gardaí, and are also concerned about credibility issues and reputational issues, so they don't want suppliers or customers to know. So while the Gardaí, the Garda National Economic Crime Bureau, or the Fraud Squad, which we used to call it, puts it, the invoice redirect at about 10 million a year, we figure it is far higher.
You mentioned invoice redirect fraud. How does that happen from a very practical perspective?
Redirect fraud typically emanates from email compromise. So either through social engineering or bad security, someone manages to access your email. In intercepting your email, they find genuine invoices. They take those genuine invoices and they produce a facsimile of them, but they change the IBAN, the payee IBAN, and potentially ring you up and say, look, we were banking with Ulster Bank or KBC, we've got a new bank account, we've put it in the invoice, and then they send the invoice to you. And people who don't actually check ring back. There's no point in taking a call like that at face value. You actually have to ring back a contact known to you in that supplier and say, have you changed to this IBAN? That's the only way to avoid it. But we have asked the Department of Finance to bring in a very simple check that already exists in the UK and Netherlands called COP, or Confirmation of Payee, and that checks online that there's a tally between the IBAN you're paying to and the registered name of that business.
Talk to us about smishing and the cost which it incurs for businesses.
This is one area where we've all seen, irrespective of whether we're businesses or consumers, texts or calls coming in purporting to come from a service provider or from An Post or a parcel delivery person or so on. And some of them have malicious links embedded in them, which can be used to insert malware or ransomware, and we have to pay those off. Or in other cases, they'll try and access our bank accounts directly. Now that is very, very significant because the level of fraud Comreg puts at a combined cost to businesses and consumers of about 300 million a year. And those frauds can be from the very small, 5, 10, 20 euro, up to the thousands of euro in the case of where ransomware or malware is installed. But again, there are technological fixes to that, and I'm talking to you on a very mid-range Samsung mobile, and that that this phone already diverts those scam texts into a scam folder. So what we're saying is if phone manufacturers are able to intercept this stuff, we do not know why mobile phone network operators can't do the same thing and squash that means of fraud,
And how important is it for businesses to use two-factor authentication?
It's an absolutely basic requirement now in any activities that have to do with money or transferring whatever transactions you're doing. If you're doing any transactions that are moving money around or authorizing someone else to do it, you need to have two-factor authorization, and you need to provide for a reasonably advanced level of security on any devices that you're doing that on, so that those things can't be intercepted by someone else.
Neil, what response has ISME received, both from government agencies and government departments, which you have contacted in relation to these important matters?
We've yet to see, a high-level response from them. In our dealings with the Gardaí and the Garda National Economic Crime Bureau, we were on the road doing road shows with them up to Christmas last year, and they've been extremely helpful. But what we want to see is government influencing operators to reduce this risk themselves. In other words, stop this stuff at source. So internet and email providers stop the passage of spoofed emails, assist businesses and consumers in securing their email, and stop the passage of scam texts and calls on networks. For example, a known method of fraud in the mobile phone industry is that you can get calls from telephone numbers that have not yet been allocated to customers. Now, that should not be possible to do, and that's the sort of stuff that, if necessary, our Department of Communications can legislate for that and require networks to deny access to numbers like that.
And Neil, of course, we're only a few months away now from Budget 2024. What are the big ticket items that you're going to be asking government to produce in the budget on behalf of your members?
The airwaves are very busy at the moment with how much extra money is in the economy and in the exchequer because of windfall corporation tax receipts and windfall income tax receipts. There's a windfall in income tax receipts because there has not been a substantial indexation of bands for years and years. And even with the move that government did last year to lift the standard rate threshold from 36,800 up to 40,000, the average industrial wage is just over 48,000. So workers €8,000 per annum below the average industrial wage are still paying at the top rate of tax. Now, our actual rates of tax in Ireland at 20% and 40% aren't exceptional in European standards, but the fact you're onto the top rate at such a low wage, that is unusual, even by comparison with what a lot of Irish people would consider sort of left-wing countries like France, Germany and Sweden. They get into the 60,000, 70,000. In Germany's case, you're up to €250,000 a year before you're paying the top rate of tax. So we'd like government to look at that, as well as looking at entrepreneurial reliefs here. Our reliefs for entrepreneurs are very poor, causing businesses when they sell up, brilliant Irish businesses are being sold to UK, German, Israeli and American businesses all the time. We want Irish people buying those businesses. And our capital gains tax remains too high at 33%. It's one of the highest in Europe. We think the government is leaving at least €500 million in uncollected capital gains tax on the table every year if it had the courage to reduce that rate to 25%.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Neil McDonnell, the Chief Executive of ISME, and it's important that government moves to protect Irish businesses against these fraudulent activities without delay.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.